The voice of sharing Durian ASEAN.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. We are going to start our blast from the grassroots with the topic, very interesting topic today, which is about election and democracy in Malaysia. Actually, we're supposed to have a guest here. She will be arriving soon, but we just would like to mention that she's from MyConsti and they have this range of rakyat guides. There are actually 9 pamphlets of the rakyat guides, and this is number 9. It's called Elections and Democracy. And what is interesting about their rakyat guides is they make all the information simplified, and their focus is to educate the society and to create awareness, the importance of knowing about what is the mechanism involving in terms of the rakyat guides and democracy. So Gauri and Asmod, how much do you know about the elections in our country, Malaysia?
I'm learning a lot. I'm still in learning process.
Well, I do have
Did you vote it?
a basic understanding. I'm not answering that question. Well, I guess in Malaysia we have this constitutional parliament, and we have a certain extent of democracy, but ultimately we do get to vote for the MPs, the assemblymen and all, but ultimately we don't get to decide who is the prime minister though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you link it to the Indonesian presidential election, it's totally different. I think the Indonesian, they are trying to follow the American system where they have two presidents, would-be presidents, nominees competing with each other, and it involves also debates and discussion, and they have to lay down what is their policy on different range of issues and areas. So I think that's interesting. But in our Malaysian politics, it's more about political parties. This is how I felt in general. It's less about the person itself, more about political parties and the personality of the top leaders.
And also, I think as much as we like to complain, I would also like to be grateful for the fact that we are not like North Korea or China, where the opposition is completely suppressed. And we do have a healthy opposition giving a good challenge to our current government, challenging them to a debate. We have all these different manifestos. So I think that's kind of healthy in a way, and especially in the last elections when the opposition came really, really close to actually taking over Malaysia from the government, and the government had to put up a really good fight to maintain the reign in the country.
Yeah, talking about government and how open is it? Wasn't there something called, I don't know if we are comfortable talking about it.
What is it?
About Bursa and
Well, it's great that you mentioned that, because Bursa is in the beginning, I mean, the real principle of Bursa is to promote free and fair election, and I think they are doing it very well in the way of advocating, creating awareness among people on the importance of free and fair election.
Yeah, actually that's all there is to Bursa, but people twist and turn it and make it such a taboo thing. It's just a request for free and clean elections. Actually, that's why it's called Bursa.
And I mean, talking about election, there are 2 types of election. One is the state assembly, or the DUN, Dewan Undangan Negeri, and also another one is the federal, which is the parliament, of election for member of parliament. So to know more about who they are, what they do, actually we have a guest today, as I mentioned earlier, Yiing Huey.
Hello. Hi.
So today you are going to explain to us about everything to do with election and democracy. So what do we need to know about the different elections here? The major one, which is the election for the parliament, member of parliaments, and also the election for the state assemblyman.
Basically, because we are running on a bicameral legislative system, so if you look at the legislative arm of the country, it has two components to it, and one is the Senate and one is the House of Representatives, where you choose your MP. And the MP part is like the huge thing, the big thing, because it's on a federal level, and like the aduns, the one the state legislative assembly, that is on a state level. So basically, when we have the big elections that come once every 5 years, that is the MP. That's when you choose your MP. But the state legislative assemblies, they can also have the elections simultaneously with this House of Representative elections.
So I guess my subsequent question is, when do elections take place, and what involves in it?
Basically, the elections take place once every 5 years. So you can still dissolve the parliament before the 5-year period ends, and that is when the Prime Minister will sort of ask the Yang di-Pertuan Agong for the permission to do so. But if it's another situation where the 5-year period has run out, and at the end of the 5-year period, if not mistaken, it's 2 months to dissolve it, to have an election in West Malaysia, and 3 months to have one in East Malaysia, Sabah Sarawak. So, and what takes place when elections go on? You have lots of campaigning, and at the same time, you have lots of mudslinging. And then,
is it even allowed? I mean, the methods of campaigning and trying to influence voters to vote for the parties that they want.
I mean, it's all about how you play the game. It's about how you campaign. But I mean, if you mudsling, it's not like an offense per se, unless you step into like the civil law issues, like a defamation. If it goes too far, then they can take an action against you. But I guess the voters are the best judges. I mean, if they are not allowed per se, how it is enforced is that the voters will see, okay, this party does this kind of sneaky little tricks, and then I will probably keep up for this party, or I won't vote them in this term, I will vote them in only the next term, or vice versa.
Are the elections? How fair are the elections here?
How fair? How do you define fair? Do you mean clean, fair? Or do you mean in a very level playing field?
Both.
Both. Okay. I think when it comes to clean fair, it's quite obvious that it's not played out very well.
What are the indicators?
For one, we've only had one political party governing us for 50 over years. And secondly, the kind of defensive attitude that we have from the government, I think that's quite a big indicator as well. And then and doesn't take much for you to find out about this kind of electoral fraud that's going on. The indelible ink that's actually quite delible, in fact edible. Edible ink, yeah, food coloring to be precise. But I mean, my point is, you don't need to dig in. You don't need to do intensive research on it. These things get reported in the media, especially with the rise of the alternative media news portals like Malaysian Insider, Malaysia Kini, and this kind of awareness amongst people, it's increased, and people learn how to question. And on the other issue of the level playing field, if we look at our other counterparts, like Southeast Asian counterparts, a better example would be the UK, because we originated our legal system, and of course following that the electoral system also, it originated from the UK. So what they have is a two-party system. A two-party system doesn't mean you have two political parties in existence. It means that these two political parties will actually take turns to get elected as the government, and that is a two-party system. The problem here in Malaysia is, despite being 57, we're 57 this year. That's quite old. But despite being that old, we're kind of like infants that are still learning adults that are still learning how to crawl. We don't have like a very clear check and balance. The government is not kept on their toes, because it's like, the opposition is sort of like pushed away. It's like a big man pushing a dwarf away. So that is the imbalance there.
But I mean, it's great that you mentioned that, because when did Malaysia started to have a bit more opening up? I mean, people started to be aware of their rights. The aware that they have actually power to change the country.
I think it follows from the 2008. I mean, if it's a recent incident, then we can look at the 2008 political tsunami. If it's something back to the 50s, then we can look at the election before the May 13 incident. But that was when the clampdown happened. So if you look at it as a graph or as a chart, you can see one hike and it goes down again, and then
It's
see
like every
second
year,
curve.
10 years cycle or something.
Yeah,
like
something like that. But I hope it's not a 10-year cycle thing for now. I hope the line continues to increase and it becomes consistent and stable in terms of the improvement. So yeah.
What are the mechanism for check and balances in this country? I mean, we have the media and civil society, but maybe you can explain further about it.
Okay, check and balances, basically you have the three arms. One of it, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. And for there to be an effective check and balance, each of these arms have to be extremely independent, though they may overlap in terms of duties, but that doesn't mean they can't be independent and they can't be of their own standing, of equal power, But I think if we talk about the bigger picture, we talk about democracy. Democracy is a very vague word, but I think what we Malaysians, what we seem to pick up more now is that, actually I can be part of this democracy. Because before this, it's such a big word. It's only for the big boys with the big suits, with the big cars. But now, no. And in fact, there is a greater need for it, because it's not enough for you to just, switch the political parties, for you to have a two-party system running. You have to have the people check and balancing it as well. It's a very key component. If you look at it, it's like a split. Okay, one half you have the representative democracy, which is this MP that we're talking about. The whole point of elections. Okay, federal level elections. And then on the other side, you have us, which is on the other side of the spectrum, coming from the grassroots.
The citizen of this country.
Yeah, direct democracy, participative democracy. That one is what we're lacking, and that is what I personally noticed and observed. Groups like Occupy Dataran try to do. And then following that, you see all these waves, even before and after. But you see that it's becoming more obvious that there's more of it as well. For example, like Bersih, people actually participating, people actually taking charge.
Yeah.
Or, for example, the Green Walk, the ones for the liners, the anti-liners group.
And what is interesting about all this movement is they are issue based. They don't focus on personality nor political party support, which I thought is kind of refreshing in a way. But why it started to grow bigger, but at the same time nothing is changing in our political issue. I mean, the political system itself. Why is it like there's a huge gap between the changes in the why there's a lack of changes in the political system, but at the same time there's a huge movements focusing on various different issues coming out.
I think one way that you can look at it is like an action-reaction thing. The action here is the slump in terms of if you're talking about the politics, right? Slump in terms of the political parties, the government, the executive, the representative democracy. And so you get all these people, like the rest of us, from the grassroots or whatnot, trying to take charge, not so much as wanting to take over, but to reach like a point of balance and to, in a way, vent the frustration. So you can see the kind of stark contrast that as people are trying to convey their frustrations, convey their anger, there is not much at the same time that some political parties can do.
Can you also talk a bit about social media and how people are using it nowadays to argue for fair elections?
I think, social media, right? It's a new thing. But I think if we one problem though that I have to pick before I continue with social media is that we can't be too dependent on it of being reflective, because if it's reflective, it's probably at most reflective of the urban, the middle class, the upper middle class, because you don't see people who are homeless, you don't see people struggling in poverty, or the orang aslis, you don't see them tweeting, do you? So social media,
not for now.
yeah, at least not for now, but yeah, but it's a reflective thing of the economic structure and the economic status in Malaysia. And when you mentioned how people take it to social media, it's just a new platform. And I think if we judge how people are thinking, how people are moving plainly, solely, the keyword is solely on social media, it might be misleading.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at social media as, if you look at it in a very particular angle, like how youths are starting to rent and how they are more exposed to it, then I think, yes, that is the positive, so-called a positive part of social media. And one thing that I think can be fairly and objectively assessed.
Okay, let's move to the representative elections. I want to talk about the election commission. What is their role, and what do you think they should be, doing?
The election commission is a body that was given rise to by the constitution. So basically, and that means there's a history to it. The Reid Commission, when our colonial masters left Malaysia and we were independent. But basically, they are and should be an independent body. But as we have seen in some cases throughout the development of Malaysian history, you can see that their autonomy has sort of been like being shredded bit by bit, and the executive having a bit more than they should into the pockets of the EC.
How do they exert their power towards the EC? Do they select the head of the EC, or what do they do?
If not mistaken, they try to. They have some laws. I can't remember it offhand now, but I read somewhere. It was somewhere on aliran. Yeah, there was this professor or lecturer that he accounted all these incidents where SPR was losing its autonomy, and I think one of which was laws that were certain laws that were changed for the government to have, for the executive to have more say over. One is the retirement age of the EC chair, and the other is basically how it's selected. How the body is to be constructed. So instead of being, when we first started off, a rather more independent EC, you have the executive sort of pushing it around, controlling it. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much. We already reached at 9 o'clock. Thanks for explaining to us about the elections and democracy in this country.
No problem. Thank you.